You are listening to This is Oklahoma, hosted by Mike Hearn, telling stories of Oklahomans and those that have made it their home.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of This is Oklahoma podcast. Mike Hearn here, your host, back with another episode. Excited to share this episode with you today, but before we do, I've got to thank our sponsors. First of all, the Oklahoma Hall of Fame. They've been a huge part of this podcast for the last few years. So the Oklahoma Hall of Fame have been sharing Oklahoma's story through its people since 1927. For more information on the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, go to www.oklahomahof.com. And for daily updates, go to oklahomahof on Instagram and give them a follow. Our other sponsor today is the Chickasaw Nation. Now, the Chickasaw Nation have sponsored pretty much everything in Oklahoma. They're a huge supporter of Oklahoma, and it's an honor to have their name and their brand supporting this podcast. So a huge shout out to Governor Anatobi for supporting this podcast. It really means a lot. Our third sponsor is Diffie Ford Lincoln down in El Reno. Now, this one makes me so happy because these guys are great friends of mine, play a lot of golf together. I've bought my cars from them. Do most of my oil changes down there, have a cup of coffee, hang out down in El Reno. It's a good spot to go. And not only are they great friends, but they provide a great service. So for over 60 years, third generation family owned Oklahoma business down in El Reno. They're also in Bethany as well. So people in the Bethany area know the Diffies really well. But if you're looking for anything new, used, Ford, Lincoln, or whatever, I'm sure they could find anything you want. Check them out, diffieford.net, and then on Instagram at diffiefordlincoln. This episode is brought to you by the Doghouse OKC. Recently, I have been in need of some doggy daycare for my two pups, and the Doghouse have come in clutch. The team over there are incredible. They've taken care of my two golden doodles, and so it's been an honor to partner with them on the podcast and share the love. And the one thing that I do with the sponsors that I have is stuff that I use and recommend, like the Diffies with my car, Hall of Fame. They're awesome. Citizens Banks, where I bank. Chickasaw Nation, huge supporter of Oklahoma. And adding to that is the Doghouse. And so if you're in need of doggy daycare in the day or boarding overnight, they do grooming and other cool things too. But I've had a fantastic experience, and it's an honor and a privilege to share this with you too. So go to thedogHouseOKC.com and follow them on Instagram at thedogHouseOKC. And hopefully our pups will run into each other.
Okay, that's all. As a backup, because you never know.
Don't fall over, please. Anyway, all right. So Valerie gets on a plane.
Yeah, so
and goes home and lifts the embargo.
The story breaks that night.
Yeah.
The cops come in my room. They don't say why. They start looking for my phone, which I was like, "You guys have my phone." Like, I don't know.
Yeah. And they hadn't told you to download this app at this point.
Nope.
Okay.
No, yep. And so so I have no idea that the story's broke.
Yeah.
You know, I'm thankful. You know, I'm praying. You know, to God, like, hey, thanks for getting Valerie home, but I pray that this story is heard and it reaches the ears that it needs to hear. But I have no idea.
And you were growing up in a pretty big faith family.
Absolutely.
This was nothing. This isn't out of the norm of you. You'd be like, you know, like, last resort, I'm gonna start praying, and then, you know, it's, again, that's not, I'm not saying that to kind of mean anything, you know, just I want to set context that, like, faith is a huge part of your life leading into this already.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And was always a part of it growing up.
Yeah, but I mean, we for sure had a deeper dependence, and it unveiled a whole new different level of relationship that we had, you know, with God during that time. And, but yeah, I just, you know, I had it's funny, I had written a bunch of different Bible verses that we've been praying over and stuff on my arm. And so whenever they brought me in to do all my photographing and stuff, they thought it was tattoos. And I was like, it's just pen, you know. Yeah. But, you know, Acts 12, you know, like Peter's liberation from prison was something that I read like over and over and over again. And I thought, you know, I pray that somebody hears this, right? Like, and I had no idea. I mean, I was in a hole, like legit hole, like no light. The only light that I would have is the hallway light that they would, that would come through the little hole. And
how bad is the food?
I couldn't really eat.
Still, I couldn't eat at this point?
No.
How much weight did you lose in those 35 days?
I think total of 20. So, yeah.
Not your ideal way of losing 20 pounds before Christmas.
Yeah, so, but yeah, I, would read my Bible through the light of the hallway. Whenever some of the prison guards were just rude, and so they'd see me doing it, and they'd flip the hallway light off so I couldn't see, But anyways, I get bail through I have to go to the Supreme Court to get bail. So I get bail 3 days later through the Supreme Court. So it happened actually very quickly.
Was it a long 3 days?
It was, yeah. Being that in that dark of an environment, you don't know day from night, right? It's weird.
Did you go through like every emotion? Like,
I did.
Did you ever feel guilty of like thinking, this is all because of me?
100%. Yeah. And 12 years is a long time, right? And like, for my wife to have to like raise kids by herself for 12 years, you even start to have to wrestle or start teasing out the thought of like, at what point do I tell her it's okay to go live life without me, right? Like,
sure, yeah.
So yeah, there's
thinking about everything at that point. Yeah,
there's big emotion going on, right?
How old are the kids then at this point when they're there, and you're thinking, so they're going through high school and into college, 12 years?
So they will have been 21 and 19.
So yeah.
So they would have been adults at this point. So yeah, pretty dark place, but I read the Bible and did push-ups like literally the entire time, and fought cockroaches because they were everywhere. Like, and there was like gang writing and feces all over the wall.
Are you in your own clothes, or did they give you clothes?
No, you had to bring your own clothes.
Okay.
So my mom actually brought me a pillow because they don't provide any of that, right?
Just on the floor.
Just on the floor. Yeah. And so I get released 3 days later. We're walking down the court steps, and I was like, I need food and I need a drink.
Yeah.
And Mom's like, well, you get the food. She's like, but you're drinking water because you got a bunch of interviews to do. And I was like, what are you talking about? And she was like, Ryan, this story's blown up. And I was like,
prayed about.
Yeah. And so we went back, started doing interviews. I get back to the hotel after the interviews, open up an email that I'd had sent to me by a friend of mine from back in my Red Bull days that does PR, like mass communication work. And she was running metrics on everything. And to that point, there had already been 2.9 billion media impressions from our story.
Wow. And
she was like, buddy, you caught the tiger by the tail. And she's like, it's time to do something with it. And so that's when we were like, okay, we're gonna wage economic warfare, and that's what it was. And it was, we were gonna do and so we moved Brian in that night after the news had broke. It wasn't a great place for he or I to be. We become public enemy number 1 and 2. And so we moved him in that night. He and I would stay up every night, and we would just basically map out what the next day was going to look like, what type of media coverage we needed. We knew we needed UK influence because it's a UK protecting island. And so it was, let's make sure that we're in the Daily Mail, let's make sure we're doing this thing. And then there was the political front of it too. And it was, okay, we need lawmakers and we need politicians on our side. We need a lobby to get them on our side. We had already been having a lot of conversations with Senator Mullen, Senator Langford, and Governor Stitt. Unfortunately for Brian, he was not getting any of that support
from Pennsylvania.
Okay. And I said it whenever I landed back in the States, I am so proud of the state of Oklahoma and the way that they stepped up, because whenever the state of Pennsylvania was not coming there for Brian, by God, the state of Oklahoma had come through in a big way. So Senator Mullen would call Brian just as much as he'd call me. And he took Brian under his wing, and he was like, hey, you're an honorary Oklahoman, Governor Stitt, Senator Langford, every one of them, whenever they spoke about, it wasn't just about me, it was about all of us that were in that situation. And so, we started having more and more conversations with Senator Mullen. Senator Mullen ended up being the one that took the lead on our case. And we had to help kind of explain to him what was going on, right? Why this was going on.
Get him up to date.
Right.
Yeah.
Everybody's thought was that it was this little low-level bribery scheme, right? And everybody thought at some point somebody just wanted to be paid off. And Mullen was like, "Hey, I've done 1,000 of these." He's like, at some point somebody's just going to need to get paid off. This is probably what it's going to result into.
Had anything come from the lady that was kind of detained as well? Had you had any contact with her at this point?
She doesn't get arrested until May 13th.
Okay, so she's on police bail or whatever, still going through the process.
Oh, so you're talking about the Jane Doe, the girl that we didn't know?
Yeah, the blonde.
So yeah. All the while, we are looking for this girl, right?
Yeah.
And nobody has any record of her.
Wow.
And so my mom sees her, Valerie sees her, my stepfather sees her. Like, we know she existed. We know she was arrested and detained.
She wasn't American?
She's not American.
Ah, okay.
And so, as it turns out, she was one of 3 people during the time that the 5 of us, ultimately the 5 of us that it became, 5 Americans that were arrested, they confiscated or arrested 3 other non-American nationals and let them go for the same exact, And so we were like, hey, we are being treated differently because we're American.
Yeah.
And the State Department initially, the embassy there, claimed that they had no record of it, even though we had time-stamped emails, all this stuff. It further got exposed that they did have record of it. And not only did they have record of it, but they had a record of it happening multiple times.
Yeah.
And so that was a big portion of our of our plea with our local lawmakers was like, hey, look, like, we are, as Americans, being treated differently down here.
And you're 2 weeks into this at that point?
Well, probably 2 weeks.
Moved Brian into the house,
And so things start ramping up. There's a news anchor out of Boston that ends up taking a ton of the more meaty stories, if you will. She leaked a Shapitz email that was sent to Michael Grimm's family, which then in turn had forced the State Department to have to issue an apology, and then Shapitz magically gets reassigned, and
you're sitting there like, really?
Yeah. Exactly. So there's a lot going on. Meanwhile, the island itself knows that what we're trying to do, right? They know we're waging economic warfare on them. And so,
because tourism is their number one.
90% of their GDP, right? And so, and 87% of that comes from the Americans, right?
Yeah.
So they
don't realize how stupid they're being at this point, clearly.
Yeah, but it's at this point, it's a job for me, right? And I took it on, and we got up at 5 a.m. every day. I made coffee, and we went to work on the phones. And so we did a ton of press, and we were told all along that it was going to be a death sentence, and it ended up, being our saving grace. Ended up getting a ton of Americans, and there were a ton of people that were, saying that we were in the wrong and that we deserved every ounce of the 12 years. I think what people did not understand was, yes, we made a mistake, right? But that same mistake, that same act of inadvertence, right? If you look at any other sovereign country, that's all handled through the Customs Act, right? And so it's a maximum of $5,000 fine, really, anywhere else in the world, sovereign countries, right? A couple years prior, Turks and Caicos decided to no longer allow that to be dealt with their Customs Act. So they started running those cases through their Supreme Court system. Whenever they put Michael Grimm into prison for the first time, the local media there celebrated that. And the headlines read, "American exceptionalism finally ends today," right? So their premier, their attorney general, which is they call him the DPP, there's one other politician that, or one other
Yeah.
TCI government employee that saw that, right? And they saw that their local constituents were celebrating, this action towards Americans. And so they said, okay, we see you and we're going to raise your hand, right? And so they forced the appellate court to hand down a 12-year minimum mandatory sentence to appease those constituents. There's only a handful of people that can vote on that island, right? You have to be one of the original families to vote. And so on an island of 50,000 people, less than 5,000 can vote. And it's made up of about 3 families that can truly vote.
They control everything.
That control everything, right?
Wow.
And so they're wanting to appease these people and being seen as being tough on these Americans and standing up. And so we were political chess pieces, right? It was less about us doing something nefarious. It was more about us being a statement piece to their constituents.
They make an example of you too.
And so that's the thing I wasn't going to stand for, right?
Yeah.
And the fact that we were being treated and we were being singled out when they were letting other nationals go, and yet we were being forced, to serve 12 years in prison. So, this fight continues on. We're making a pretty big splash in the media, and we're putting a pretty big dent in their tourism.
Were you ever kind of during this period, were you ever kind of scared for your life, or anything happened that you're like, whoa, this is kind of getting real?
Yeah,
you said
sure.
you put Brian in.
Yeah, so May 6th, so Tyler wasn't able to move in with us because he was arrested in Grand Turk.
Okay.
So he's in the same chain of islands, but you had to take a plane to get to where he was. So May 6th, someone starts calling in bomb threats to the airports of Turks and Caicos. In total, I think they shut the airports down 17 times.
Yeah.
One time they had to do a full-on evacuation where they cut holes in the fence and evacuated planes, and it was bad, right? And in these bomb threats, they kept referencing me and Brian Hagerich. They said, until you let them go, these are going to continue. So the local media said that we were orchestrating all these bomb threats.
Right.
The moment this happened, so I had to run 2.5, because I had to check into jail every day.
Yeah.
There's a 2.5 mile run there and a 2.5 mile run back. And so day 2 after these bomb threats start happening, I have somebody attempt to run me over at one point whenever I was running to and from the jail, and it was sketchy, right?
Yeah.
It's a pretty rough island.
Yeah.
If you
get
really start
outside
to peel
the
back,
results.
yeah. And so it was sketchy at times.
Do you ever find out who was calling in the bomb threat?
No. And Brian and I, so we thought, okay, we're just going to ignore it at first, right?
Because it sounds like someone is trying to work in your favor.
Right.
Right.
But
also
it was
causing an issue.
Yeah, it was causing a huge issue. And so it goes on for about a week. And then I'm trying to remember, I'd have to look back at when we came out with our press release, but we had to issue a press release condemning the threats of violence.
Yeah.
Because they ramped it up, and they even started naming schools that they were going to bomb on the island. And so we were like, hey, we've got to and so, however, Daily Mail ran it, NBC, CBS, all these other people ran our press release condemning these threats of violence. However, the local media there was not going to run it.
You're a target number one.
Yeah, they wanted us to be public enemy number one.
Yeah.
And so, then shortly after, Sharita Greer is arrested. We hear about it through a prison guard that we had made contacts with. And so we start looking for her. We find her. She was actually in the jailhouse that I was in, but they didn't have a jail for her, or they didn't have a cell for her. And so they handcuffed her to a chair for 4 days.
Oh my gosh.
So we start, we email the embassy.
Yeah.
We send my mom in because we're public enemy number
So
one.
mom's still there at this point?
My mom never left.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Go, Mom.
My mom is, she's owed so much more credit than she's received up until this point, because
she went mama bear mode and was like, I ain't not leaving
yeah,
without you.
not only was she a mom to me, but she was a mom to
The team. Yeah.
to Brian, to Sharita. Sharita clung to her the entire time. But yeah, so we send my mom in because they're not going to let us back. So we send her into the jail, and she goes and finds her, and she comes out in tears. She's like, she's handcuffed to a chair, guys. And so,
It's barbaric.
yeah.
Right.
So we start emailing the embassy. We're like, we've got to do something. We bring her food, we bring her clothes, we bring her stuff, right? Embassy won't do nothing, right? And so, you know, it continued to cement the fact that they were working against us. So we get with Mullen. Mullen then gets Senator Fetterman on board, which turns the congressional delegation that they're trying to bring down to the island to bipartisan. They needed that to happen because Chuck Schumer had to call recess on the Senate floor for them to fly
There's
down.
so many things that have
Oh
to
my
fall
gosh.
into place, and you're waiting on politics, which takes too long.
And we've got a like legit, like we called it the war room,
Yeah.
that we would sit out every night and like
Uh-huh.
we put up poster boards and we were like, okay, we need this to happen for this to happen. We need this person on board for this to happen, right?
So you have a great education now. In
Oh
all
my
politics.
goodness. And so we, so Fetterman comes on board. Mullen is, you know, the one that finally is able to talk him over. It has caught so much traction at this point, though, it's kind of hard for him not to, right? And so there's such a public outcry for something to be done because it's such a draconian sentence.
And it like, does the 15-year-old boy in you that's watched war movies think, just put a plane down here, fly a helicopter down here, and bust the door down and get me out of here?
I can't tell you how many boats I looked at.
Right?
Yeah.
Speedboat run and get me out of
there
here.
was,
right?
there was, you know, like, and it felt the entire time as if I was being like detained by like the C team, not even the B team, right?
Yeah.
Like these people, like when they put my ankle irons on me, they'd like often put them on upside down and inside out, like, and so like I couldn't shuffle my feet. They'd be like ribbing me with their like you know, their assault rifle, or like they'd be transporting me and they'd like be brandishing their weapons and swinging weapons everywhere, and I'm like, this is wild, right? Like, so yeah, man. I mean, I had little doubt that we could have made it off the island. There was like no doubt in my mind. The question that nobody could answer was, could we be extradited? And so the fact that we could not be given like 100%, you will not be extradited. Like, you know, it was, that was the most fearful thing, because yeah, I think I could have made it off the island. I'm confident of that. I mean, I literally, the way they kept tabs on me is I ran to the jail and I wrote my name in a notebook paper.
Right.
Like, and Ryan Watson signed my name, wrote the date, and run back, right? Like,
just quick, just under a 5K there, 5K back, get your workout for the day, sign in to come home.
Yeah. And so I had little doubt that I couldn't have made it off the island. The question was, could they bring me back? And if they could, you know, then I'm there for 20 years.
Yes.
You know, and
that's
so,
really bad. Yeah.
So it's like, you know, is it worth it? We felt like we were making traction. The local media was eviscerating us.
Right.
And these Americans this, and you know, Brian had already had his hearing, hadn't had his sentencing yet, and the prosecutor stood up, and the entire time it was these Americans. It was clearly us versus the.
Did he have the same attorney as you?
He did.
Okay.
Yeah, and so
I don't know how that attorney's like still living there then. If he's on your side and they're hating Americans.
Yeah.
Right. That's. I mean, the guy's got some balls to be representing you guys.
Yeah.
Right.
For sure. Yeah.
To be local, anyway. Wow.
Yeah. I mean, whenever he agreed to, he knew I was going to go to the media anyways.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I think he saw that look in my eye, like this guy's not messing around.
Right.
He had no idea that it was going to turn into what it did. He thought, and he even made like a flippant comment, like, he's like, I'm telling you, man, he's like, you think it's going to be something, and if like a couple people tweet about it, and he was like, a couple Joe Bobs, he's like, it means nothing. He's like, all it's going to do is going to get you killed, right? Like, then it turns into what it did. But yeah, so
the stuff on the Senate floor starts happening, making waves.
Right.
Like, where do we, and what day? I mean, you're there. It's May at this point.
We're in May now. the
You're
embassy.
spending money on a VRBO. Like,
Oh, it's hundreds of thousands of dollars into this
yeah.
at this point, right?
Yeah.
But our attorney was wildly expensive,
Yeah.
right? As you can imagine, cash, right?
Yeah.
Like, and so, but yeah, so the embassy finally agrees to come meet with us. They send a consular to come meet with us. It's the first time that anybody's met with them
you've
this
been
entire
there
time.
3-4 weeks at this point?
Oh,
More
yeah.
than that?
So I've been there for longer than that. Brian had been there for months, right? Had never once had even had a phone call. So we sit down with this lady and she was like, you know what the joke is, the running joke is on the island? And we're like, what? Or at the embassy office, we're like, what? She's like, why don't you two just get on a boat and just make everybody's lives easier? And I was like,
Really?
are you serious right now? And, you know, but whenever we sat and the more we talked to her, it's like it became more and more evident that she was there to protect the island and not us.
You. Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, now we've got somebody working against us. This was all, we were doing a very good job of documenting everything. May 19th, the CODEL gets green lighted to fly down. So the Congressional Delegation Task Force, it's led by Senator Mullen, flies to the island. And it was a wild thing to see that big Mill Air like land in that little airport.
Yeah.
Man, I mean, I thought Calgary's here,
Right,
like, we're
yeah,
going home,
exactly.
right? Like it was
It's
like
screaming eagles, let's get out
oh,
of here. Yeah.
and I have a cell phone video of it, and I'm
Yeah.
singing in the background, and I'm proud to be an American.
Right.
Because I legit thought we were going home, right?
Yeah.
And they come in, we go to dinner.
You meet them face to face for the first time.
Meet them face
Yeah.
to face. So there was, I think it was Senator Mullen, Senator Fetterman, and then congressmen and from Florida, Texas, Virginia. I mean, there was like 12 or 14 of them there. Sharita was from Florida, so DeSantis and Rick Scott are now on board. There's quite a few people that are
Pretty
in at
heavy
this
hitters
point.
there, yeah.
Cruz, there's a lot of people that are behind us, and so we sit down at this dinner. At that dinner, it then exposes, I think there were 5 major lies and cover-ups that the local State Department, the embassy, at that embassy, were reporting and lying about regarding our situation. That all came unfolded. It was eye-opening, man.
Yeah.
You know, because as an American, like you said, like you watch these movies and like the people are in trouble abroad. It's like run to the embassy. They're gonna save you. And it was eye-opening to see like not only these people like not helping me, but they were very much working against us, right? Like, you know, if you look at the statutes of why or how the State Department can get involved and actually extract somebody, like one of the top reasons is inhumane prison conditions. That prison was condemned a year prior by the United Nations, right? It was condemned. No running water, no electricity.
Yeah.
And
Cockroaches everywhere.
yeah. And so the consular had told us that she was going to tour it to determine if it was fit for us to stay in. She wrote a report that she had. Whenever it turns out, she was never allowed to actually tour the prison, but she wrote a false report saying that it was fit for us to stay in. I mean, saying that they'd had no recollection or no knowledge of Sharita's being handcuffed to a chair. They had no knowledge of non-American citizens being released, which turns out they had 3 reports.
Yeah.
And so it was extremely eye-opening. But Senator Mullen, I mean, he was like a dog with a bone, man. At that point, I thought, okay, like he's gonna see this through. He goes in the next day to have the sit-in with the local government. The premier, which is like their president, is pounding his chest, and he's like, I'm gonna sue the Americans. You guys don't threaten me. And Mullen's like, hang on, you're gonna sue us?
Yeah.
What are you talking about? And he was like, yeah, you manufacture the firearms and ammunition that end up in my country. And he's like, no, let me show you where they come from.
Yeah.
And so he pulled out a file. And he says, look, it's these 2 Haitian gangs. This is where it's all coming in from. It's all being, and he's like, you know how we have this information? He said, because we help patrol your water with our Coast Guard, right? Like as a favor to you and the United Kingdom.
Yeah.
Like, go ahead and sue us, and this all goes away tomorrow.
Yeah.
Right.
And then
like
you got whoever you want
yeah.
showing up and running
Yeah.
over your.
And he was like, and so he was like, and by the way, you know, they estimated it'll be about 4 weeks if we pull out of here that Haiti will take you over. So good luck, you know. The UK had flown in the Minister of Foreign Affairs for that meeting, and so he took notice of that very, very idle threat, you know. And, you know, he walked out of the meeting, Mullen did, and called me, and he was like, buddy, that didn't go like we thought it would. He's like, they're going to try and put you in prison.
Where are you when you have that phone call? You back at the house?
I'm at the
VRBO. Live speaker to like the whole
yeah,
family?
so Brian's there with me. You know, we're all thinking that
Hey, jump on the plane, let's go.
Yeah, like we're going to get back on the
bags
military
packed.
air. And like, we legitimately have our bags packed.
Yeah.
And we're sitting there and he's like, no, it didn't go well. And it's like getting heaved out of a 10-story building, right?
Yeah.
And so Brian's court case, or Brian's sentencing this is on Monday. Brian's sentencing is going to be this Friday. And so it's like, okay, we think we're going home. Now all of a sudden we're not going home. So Brian's sentencing was May 24th. They had the premier there. I mean, like the entire police force was at the Supreme Court. Like it was, I mean, it looked wild, right? They end up, you know, the TPP, which is like the attorney general for the island, is pressing for 12 years still. It hasn't backed off of it. Well, you know, the judge ends up ruling that there are exceptional circumstances in his case. Her verbiage, though, is that there are exceptional circumstances in his case, but it doesn't mean that there's going to be exceptional circumstances in the other cases, right? Like, and she named off what his exceptional circumstances were. Some would apply to me, some might not, right? So he ends up getting a suspended sentence and a big fine. And I think might have the same fate, but there's no guarantee. Tyler, he ended up doing some things that got his court case moved in front of mine, which was hard pill to swallow at the time, but I get why he did some of the things that he did. There was a lot of concern initially though, because if he had a more harsh judge, and so if there was a chance that he could set precedents for the rest of us. So there was a lot of concern with kind of the timing and it all. He goes a couple days later.
And you haven't been in contact with him because he's on a different.
We were in contact with him,
but not physically.
But not physically in person, right? Like Brian and I are brothers at this point. And so I have my expedited hearing to try and get things speeded up. My attorney was not going to allow me to have that until Brian's sentencing. So a few days later, I have mine. You know, Brian's left the island at this point, and then they approve my expedited hearing, but they tell me it's going to be 3.5 weeks before they'll do it.
Oh, jeez.
Which is one of the hardest days.
Yeah.
When I was there, right? Because I've lost my brother. You know, the media seems to have kind of wanted to start putting a bow on the story, like,
we're good now.
We're good now, right? But it definitely was not. It did not guarantee my fate, right? And so there was a lot of panic. There was a lot of, you know, that's whenever God and I were having some hard conversations. You know, I was like, hey, I'm here to serve you in all of this. But
and you're relaying the information to Valerie at this point, the kids too, right? Like that's the tough part. Because they're just waiting on you.
Now they think I'm coming home on a quicker scale, and it's getting kicked out. And so there was also a lot of concern that they were trying to buy themselves time to try and figure out how to do something and get me. The entire time I was,
and also your life's at risk as well. You know, not to mention that.
Yeah, and you know, I was the one that broke the story, right?
Yeah,
they hated me the most. And so, you know, it was a tough few weeks, but a lot of prayer, a lot of working out, a lot of FaceTime with Val and the kids. Then we get to June 14th, and media starts to pick up right before then again. And as the media starts to pick up the second time, the Resort Association is like, all right, guys, like this is enough. Like you need to do something about this. And so they start putting pressure on the island
because there are people that canceling flights, tourism's gone
crushed. Like they've crushed. And so,
rightly so.
So at which point, June 14th, what they consider the opposition in their political landscape down there submits for there to be an appeal to their 12-year minimum mandatory law. June 19th is the day of my hearing, and that actually goes into effect. So another huge God thing, the fact that some hillbilly from Oklahoma was forced a foreign country to change the law inside of 70 days, right?
Right.
But yeah, so they submit that June 14th. Val flies down to the island. One of my best buddies, JC.
Did you tell him not to?
There was a lot of conversation, right?
Yeah.
There were a lot of concerns for safety.
Do not come down here.
She wanted to be there. I was torn, right?
Right.
I needed to see her. Yeah. Needed to hug her for a last time if it was going to be the last time. But I was concerned for her safety, right? Like, so we talked with my buddies, JC Arrington, SNU guy.
Okay.
He said he was going to fly down with her. My brother-in-law and my sister flew down with her. So she kind of had a team of people that were with her to make her feel more comfortable about coming to the island. And so she flew in. And yeah, man, it was a huge, weight lifted from my heart to be able to get to see her again. But she was about to have to go see what it was like to sit in one of those courtrooms. And it's not easy, right? Because they don't like Americans. It's wild because they all have the white wigs.
Oh, do they really?
Yeah.
Like the UK does?
Yeah.
Wow, I didn't know that. Yeah.
So, I always joke, I'm like, if there was ever a movie there's like made about this, like there's going to be some comic relief in it. Because at one point, like when I first get taken to the Supreme Court, I'm getting like shoved up these stairs and ankle irons and everything. Like I'm chained, right? Like, and this guy's like pushing me up these stairs with his assault rifle. And I get to the top of the stairs, and my attorney is this short African-American guy, like comes running around the corner with a blonde wig on. And he's like, we got to talk about your court case. And I was like, why are you dressed up like the Quaker Oat guy?
It's like a scene from Pirates of the Caribbean.
And I'm like, I can't get like serious about this right now, and I need to be serious. But why are you dressed up like this? Yeah. And so, they do God Save the King. Like I'm trying to keep up with all the bows. I look like an idiot. But yeah. So the DPP the entire time is the prosecutor that is trying to put me in prison for 12 years, saying pretty crazy things. Wow. And so. We sit, she has to sit through those court hearings, but have my hearing on the 19th, and then sentenced on the 21st. And then, through the grace of God, I was, given a suspended sentence, paid a fine, which it was pretty negligible.
Didn't matter at that point.
You'd
spend enough anyway.
And so it was a drop in the bucket compared to what we'd spent. So got on a plane and
straight
immediately. Yeah.
Did you ever get any money back? Like, is it?
No. I mean, well, so
like, is there any way to get money back other than like doing a book and a Netflix series or whatever?
Well, my sister had started a GoFundMe.
Okay.
And that ended up being an enormous blessing for us, because they started that like right around the same time that everything broke, right? Like the news broke on it. And so there were a lot, like Joe Rogan had shared it, Donald Trump Jr. had donated, like there were a lot of people that had latched onto it. And it ended up being...
How much money did it cost it totally?
That whole experience was in the couple hundreds of thousands of dollars, right?
Wow.
Which, as it turned out, that's about what the GoFundMe raised, right? So,
awesome.
Lord will provide.
Yeah.
And we saw that coming, and Brian didn't have a GoFundMe, Sharita didn't have a GoFundMe. It was on our hearts to make sure they had a place to stay and they had food to eat, and so I did all the cooking and all that stuff, right? We bought all the groceries, and but yeah, man, it was an expensive 40th birthday, to say the least. But like I told Valerie from the moment it happened, like while we were in the back of the police car, I was like, God has a plan. Like I'm like not at all doubting that God has a plan in this, and He's going to use us for something. And I feel like it's going to be something bigger than what we know right now. And so a lot of people would ask, like, do you feel you have to be like, why me, right? And it was never why me from a pity standpoint, but it was why me do you feel like I'm equipped, God, to go potentially serve a bigger purpose, right? When we had our initial conversation with the kids, because we had to be honest with them when the news broke, Valerie pulled them out of school.
Because you're old enough to understand. And
we're old enough to understand.
In school and people talk and what,
And the OCS community has been such a blessing to us.
Yeah.
Everybody knew about it. It was what everybody was talking about. They were going to hear about it, and they were going to hear that their dad was going to go to jail for 12 years, right? So we needed to be honest with them. But I told them, hey, God has a plan for us, right? Like, and we're here to serve it. And if we can serve it in a time of trial, like, it's going to make a bigger impact than anybody standing on any podium, right? Saying, because of God. We need to be in our trial and say, because of God. So one of the coolest things about this is my 9-year-old son had just read the Action Bible, which is like a animated version, like comic book version of the Bible. And so as we're telling him this, he says, Dad, I wanna share the gospel with the kids in Turks and Caicos. I was like, all right, cool. And so he gets with my mom. My mom sends out a Facebook group message to our neighborhood group and asks if they can put together some Bibles to help Van, kind of fulfill this quest that he has. And, next thing you know, we're like watching my mom's Ring doorbell camera because she's there with me, right? And we're like seeing these books these Bibles stack up, right? And so I think they put together like 40 that first time. Whenever family would come down to visit, they would smuggle them in. Our driver that had put up surety for us, his son had taken one, we'd given one to his son. His son had taken it to school, and it caused kind of a rise at the school. And we get a call from the principal, and he's like, hey, we came across this Action Bible. And we're like, oh goodness, like we've smuggled these in, right? Like
they hate us already.
Something that's supposed to be taxed, right? Like, I'm like, I'm about to go to prison. And he's like, this is actually a really cool book. Like, we'd like to get one for every kid in the school. And we're like, all right, how many? And so in total, we've sent over 340 of these Action Bibles to the kids in Turks and Caicos. And to just see that, to see the amount of people that have reached out in prayer and the amount of those things, I mean, it's been as tough of a time as it was such a blessing. We got, I told Van, I made him the promise. I said, Daddy's going to come home. And I was like, and not only am I going to come home, I'm going to make sure all 4 of the other people are going to come home too. And by the grace of God, July 11th, Sharita was the last one to come home. Now, the unfortunate part of this story is that since Sharita came home, the media has, everybody celebrated that, right? Media started looking the other way, and there have since been 4 other Americans that have been arrested.
Oh, so this just keeps going. Yeah.
So actually, a mother and son were arrested on Monday night.
Like just gone Monday?
Yeah. So it continues. Yes, they've changed their law. Yes, they might not be looking at 12 years. It's still a potential, right? Very much a real threat for them to be looking at 12 years in prison. It's not a mandatory, though. But but yeah, I mean, you're talking about a very corrupt island, right? And an island that has a long history of corruption. In 2009, the UK disbanded the Turks and Caicos government because it was so corrupt. There was a guy, the premier then at the time was Michael Missick, right? He fled the country, did all this stuff. 3 years later, they gave them the ability to govern themselves back. You get through an election cycle, then all of a sudden Charles Wayne Missick is now the next premier. It's Michael's brother, right? Now all of a sudden Michael's back on the island doing business, right? So,
Jeez.
you know, if you look at, I mean, everybody on that island has the same last name, right? Everybody's a Missick, everybody's a Ford, right? Like, and so there's a number of families on that island that are running that island that are very corrupt, right? And
it's not the paradise that it's portrayed
yeah,
as in the vacations.
I mean, they've already had, I mean, it's a population of 40 to 50,000, give or take, depending on the season. And I think they're averaging 1 to 2 murders a week right now. I mean,
I had one of my really good friends like went there like I want to say probably in September.
Really?
Yeah, like him and his wife went for like 5 or 6 days.
Yeah, man. I mean,
but you wouldn't think of it unless you're
yeah.
in your story, and you know, thank you for telling it, and like, you know, that's obviously part of the story and the mission too. It's like this needs to be told.
Right.
People need to be aware of where they're going.
Yeah.
And how corrupt this place is. It's not, you know, huts on the sea and
right.
white sandy beaches. You know, like it looks like in some glamorous photos. Like it's.
Yeah, it is. It's a man. I mean, clear water, yes.
Yeah.
Right. There's a lot of clear water in this world, right? And are there some amazing people? I mean, there were people that put up their
Your
livelihood
taxi
for
driver.
us, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And the wild thing is, his last name is Missick,
Yeah.
right? And he knows it's a banana republic, right? Like, he speaks openly about it being a banana republic. In fact, the premier is his second cousin, right?
There's nothing they can do about it.
And so, I mean, the island is controlled by a very few amount of people, and it's kind of a scary place, right? Like, we were in jail with a lot of like Haitian gang. I mean, it's you know, if you want to be on and have an honest conversation, a lot of the violence that they're experiencing right now isn't necessarily from the local Turks and Caicos people. It's the violence coming in from Haiti, right? But what are they doing about it? Nothing, right? Just like, you know, this whole guise of, well, we've got to keep our island safe, so we're going to enact these strict gun laws. If you wanted to keep your island safe, you would scan bags upon entry, right? They don't scan bags upon entry. They only scan bags when they're leaving, right? So
there you are.
It's their only point of entry in the island, right? And they don't scan bags as they're coming in. Yeah. So are they really trying to keep their island safe, right? Like, and you know, I mean, those, you know, the guns and drugs that end up on that island aren't coming into that airport. They're coming in on a dinghy, you know, like on a raft. Yeah. And so, but yeah, you know, we were an easy target for a political chess piece, and they wanted to make a point of it. But you know, the unfortunate thing is the people that did that to stay in power, to keep their political positions, are hurting a lot of the people that are there that are good people, right? And so, you know, that's the unfortunate thing. Yeah. But they've got an upcoming election cycle, and they wanted to be seen as tough on Americans, right? So,
yeah. Wow. And you just got caught up in it for 75 days.
Yeah.
Jeez. What's next? Well, how do you, you know, like you said, you know, early on, like, there's a reason that this happens, and there's a reason that God sort of chose you to do this as well. Like, how do you feel like you go on from here and continue to use this as a good thing and pass on a message? Like, what do you have that you want to accomplish with this now?
I have started writing.
Okay.
I don't know how well my Seminole high school education has prepared me for that. Some of that's probably my own fault, right?
You can start a podcast. I'll help you with that. That's easy.
It's actually funny. We've talked about that. Brian and I talk every day, almost, or not every day. We talk weekly, but we've talked every day the last few days, and we've talked a lot about that. And it was like, man, there is so much to tell. I'm on day 4, and I'm like 15,000 words in, right? Like day 4 of like our time in Turks and Caicos, and I'm 15,000 words in, and I've talked to some publishers and they're like, holy crap, like we're like, there's like,
it's like the hypothesis.
Yeah, exactly.
Keep going. Yeah.
And so, Brian and I've talked about it. It's like, what if we told this in a series podcast form, or what if we did a book, or, we've talked a lot with Ben Carson. Dr. Ben Carson was really in our corner through it all. We've been on his podcast a couple times and had a couple conversations with him. And he's been very much encouraging that we write a book. And he's like, hey, I know some people at Angel Studios. I think they might take a liking to this story, none of which has come to fruition. But, for right now, Val and I have been going to different churches, sharing our testimony, really just kind of showing God's hand in it all, his design in it all, how he's used everybody through all of this. His timing in it was the thing I wrestled with the most, but looking back on it, it was perfect, right? Like, had the police officer showed up at 10 a.m. that day to take us, I would have never known that they had arrested a non-American citizen and let her off the hook, right? Like, I would have, if I had been tried and sentenced any earlier, like, this law wouldn't have taken place like the day of my hearing, right? Like, which had bearing on my hearing.
Or the timing of your father-in-law sending the text to the family group, right? And then your firefighter brother sitting next to a front of you, like it's mad. When you put it all together, and like you said, there's God's timing.
Yeah,
this.
and so
way to explain it.
His timing is perfect, and so that's we love talking about it, and I think that honestly, it's become therapy for Valerie and I, right? To see that there was purpose in it all, right? Like, we did get the island to change their law, right? There still is corruption going on there. There's still things that need to be addressed. I would still raise a huge red flag. I'm not saying don't go or shut down the island. I mean, if you choose to, if you hear this story and that's your choice, right? But I would want people to go with extreme caution, right? And it's not just, it wouldn't just necessarily happen with, ammunition. It could be a list of things. Trust me, I became well versed because my mother is, recovering from cancer, and she takes CBD oil, and we didn't know it when she flew down in such a frenzy to get there, and she just, out of last second, elected to leave it behind. But once we started reading the law, like, if she had flown down with that CBD oil, it was 10 years in prison, right? Wow. Yeah. And so, there's a list of things that could be noxious at best in the States that, that these countries that have a point to prove are going to try and pick easy fruit and try to make their hay out of it. And it's, this is a country that has a bad track record, and they were disbanded for being corrupt, right? Like, there's plenty of news articles out there about it. It happened in 2009, like, not back in the 60s or the 70s. Like, this is very recent, right? So,
would you go back?
Not a chance.
No,
not a chance. If you shot me dead and flew me to that island, I would resurrect and
stop swimming.
Not a chance. It's nightmarish to me,
Same for Valerie, I swimming too.
Yeah.
Well. Yeah.
The sad part is like, you sit there in this, like, dream-like
what you think is
setting,
paradise,
right?
Yeah.
And I was living the worst nightmare of my life, and there were a lot of things I was afraid to share with people, just because I was like, people are going to think I'm embellishing this, right? Like, to come out and say, oh, the State Department's actually working against me, right? Like, but like, it was my life, you know, like that was something that I was dealing with on a daily basis. And I wanted, like, when I'd hear families laugh and play when we would, you know, be walking to the grocery store or whatever the case may be, I wanted so bad to be like, pack your things and get out of here, like as fast as you can, right? Like, and so, yeah, man, I don't think I could ever go back. I'm quite certain of that.
Yeah,
So.
I think it's really neat that you and Valerie are going to churches and like talking about, you know, the resilience and just like the communication aspect and strength building of your marriage during that time.
Oh, 100%.
You know, not to mention the kids too,
Yeah.
having to be there for the kids and everybody else, but also the surrounding community of OCS that really jumped on you guys. That's really
Goodness
cool.
gracious. Yeah, I mean, you know, I've told people so many times, like, you know, Acts 12 was something that I read over and over again. If you read that story in summation, you know, James is persecuted by King Herod, and he does it, and then it's celebrated by the Jews right there. He starts, and he's like, oh, you like this? Okay, so I'm going to go get more. And he goes and gets Peter and puts Peter in prison, thinking that he's going to appease these constituents, right?
Yeah.
And then it's the church that's back home and Peter both fervently praying, and then next thing you know, an angel comes and he walks right out of prison. I think that my story parallels that story so much. You know, it was, you know, Michael Grimm was the James in that story, right? And once he was put in prison, he was, you know, the local government was celebrated, and you know, we were just the ones that were coming next, right? And so, you know, fortunately for us, we never ended up having to do 12 years, but yeah.
I mean, it's again, like, you know, like you said, how the reason that you not have, I guess, would sort of have a peace with it because of your faith and how, you know, God's got a plan for you. There are so many ways you could have taken this. You could have been bitter and like,
right,
you know, like, why me? And again, and kind of pulled the victim card, and you know, just it's a great story, you know. So for so many reasons, you know, the fact that your mom stayed there the whole time is just that stands out to me. I love that.
Yeah.
You know, but yeah, I mean, it's and to still have a relationship with all these people too, right?
Yeah.
To still talk to, you know, Senator Mullen and you know, Brian and all the people that were involved, and you know,
Absolutely.
to again use this in a good, positive way and keep sharing a message of, you know, like whatever it is you're going through.
Yeah. That's why I feel like this story is so relevant to your podcast, is because it was Oklahoma, like undoubtedly, that led that charge that got us out of that situation, right? Like, it was a little school that turned into a bigger community, that then turned into a state affair, right? That then forced other states to get involved, right? And it was born and bred out of this state, right? Like, and that is something I feel like I am forever grateful for, like, our fellow Oklahomans, right? Like, because they were so kind. The amount of people, my family and I walked down the street, the amount of people that just pull us aside, they're like, we were praying for you so much, right? Like, it's such a blessing to hear, right? But like, I can't even begin to express how thankful I am of, like, just Oklahoma, right? Like, it is 100% what saved our lives, right?
Yeah.
Like Senator Mullen, Senator Langford, Governor Stitt, right? Like, but you know, Senator Mullen he's whether he likes it or not, he's got a friend for life. He made a great mistake giving me his phone numbers.
Yeah. Well, mate, thanks so much for coming in. I did not expect us to be here for 2 hours, but I really appreciate your time.
You bet.
Great story, and I hope that, you know, if one person listening to this and reaches out to you, or church listening, you know, want to come and share your story, I hope something good comes from this. But thank you so much for coming in. Thanks to Wes for putting us together.
Yeah.
Oklahoma's a small place, and we have mutual friends everywhere. So yeah, shout out to Wes for putting us together. And for people listening, what is the best way to get in touch with you? Do you have an email address you want to share, or a website, or anything people can reach out, social media?
To be honest, so somebody started a We Are the Watsons.
Okay.
Or oh goodness gracious! I'll have to get back to you.
Get back to you. And I'll put
I signed off of all of social media during that time.
Sure you did. Yeah.
There were a lot of people that had some not so nice things to say, and I made it a point to not get involved in any of that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I'll open my Instagram back up to being. I shut it down to private, but I'll open it back up to being public. I feel like we're kind of outside of a lot of the stones.
So is it We Are the Watsons? Is the
let me see, or Bring Home the Watsons or something like that.
That's what it is, something like that. I'll put it in the description down
sad
below.
to say I didn't. Bring the Watsons Home.
Okay.
Yeah. It's Instagram handle called Bring the Watsons Home.
Okay, I'll put that in the description down below. Thanks for coming in, man. I really appreciate it. And I'm looking forward to running into you and hear you and your wife speak. I think that'd be really neat.
Yeah,
so
love to.
Awesome. For people listening, hope you enjoyed that. Reach out to Ryan at Bring the Watsons Home on Instagram. I'll put the link for that down in the descrition. And we'll catch you next episode. Cheers.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, man.
Hey,
that
man.
was awesome. Appreciate you.
Great time.
Hope you guys enjoyed that great episode. Thank you so much for listening. As always, a huge shout out to our sponsors, the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, sharing Oklahoma story through its people since 1927. For more information on the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, go to www.oklahomahof.com and follow them on Instagram for daily updates at oklahomahof. Our other sponsor, the Chickasaw Nation, amazing sponsor. They do amazing things for the state, and they're always sponsoring something in Oklahoma. They're a huge supporter of Oklahoma, and without their support, we wouldn't be able to do what we do. And our third sponsor is Diffie Ford Lincoln down in El Reno. Now, this one makes me so happy because these guys are great friends of mine, play a lot of golf together. I've bought my cars from them, do most of my oil changes down there, have a cup of coffee, hang out down in El Reno. It's a good spot to go. And not only are they great friends, but they provide a great service. So for over 60 years, third generation family owned Oklahoma business down in El Reno. They're also in Bethany as well. So people in the Bethany area know the Diffies really well. But if you're looking for anything new, used, Ford, Lincoln, or whatever, I'm sure they could find anything you want. Check them out, diffieford.net, and then on Instagram at diffiefordlincoln. This episode is brought to you by the Doghouse OKC. Recently, I have been in need of some doggy daycare for my 2 pups, and the Doghouse have come in clutch. The team over there are incredible. They've taken care of my 2 golden doodles, and so it's been an honor to partner with them on the podcast and share the love. And the one thing that I do with the sponsors that I have is stuff that I use and recommend, like the Diffies with my car, Hall of Fame. They're awesome. Citizens Banks, where I bank. Chickasaw Nation, huge supporter of Oklahoma. And adding to that is the Doghouse. And so if you're in need of doggy daycare in the day or boarding overnight, they do grooming and other cool things too. But I've had a fantastic experience, and it's an honor and a privilege to share this with you too. So go to thedogHouseOKC.com and follow them on Instagram at thedogHouseOKC. And hopefully our pups will run into each other.
Thank you for listening. We are inspired by those around us and hope that you are too. Make sure you subscribe to this podcast on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a review so we can keep telling your stories. For more great Oklahoma content, follow This Is Oklahoma on Facebook and Instagram.